Hello Netcode-Hub channel viewers, welcome back to another exciting tutorial. Today we are diving into a crucial aspect of developing robust and reliable web APIs, and that is unit testing controllers. We will be using three powerful tools to achieve this, that is Fake It Easy, Fluent Assertion, and XUnit framework. Whether you are a seasoned developer or just getting started, this tutorial will equip you with the skills to write clean, efficient, and maintainable unit tests for your web API controllers. So let's get started and make testing fun and effective. First of all, let's understand what unit testing is and some of its importance. Unit testing, it is a software testing technique where individual components or units of a software are tested in isolation from the rest of the application. So the primary goal of doing this is to validate that each unit of the software performs as expected. This helps in identifying bugs or issues early in the development cycle, making the software more robust and reducing the cost and effort required for later stages of testing. Now, for the benefit of using unit testing, it helps you to identify bugs early in the development process. It also ensures that each unit of work or each unit works correctly before integrating them into the larger system. It also serves as a documentation for the code, and it explains how each unit is expected to behave. So anytime that you're done creating your application, you have to test it. Okay, now let's see. This video is going to be into, I think, 3 or more sections. Yeah, well, 3 sections. Now we're going to first talk about how to unit test controllers, how to unit test our repositories, and how to unit test our services. But for now, this video is geared towards testing controllers. Now, what are we going to do today? We're going to create a solution. We're going to add the XUnit framework as a project. We're going to add a web API. In that, you're going to connect our API to database, and that is specifically for SQLite. Aside from that, we're going to create a repository which has our interface and our implementation. Aside from that, we do our registrations and a whole lot. Then we create our controller. We inject our repository in there as an interface so we can perform CRUD. Aside from that, when we see that our CRUD is working in an API, then we go back to the unit testing, and we're going to create a unit test to test each of the CRUD endpoint. So you're going to have all the CRUD, and we're going to test each CRUD and see whether it is giving us what is expected to give us. And that is what we're going to do today. Alright, so I have a Visual Studio Launch in here. Make sure you have also yours launched, as you can see. The next thing that we're going to do here is I have created just a blank solution. So you can create blank solution. The reason why I made this is I want to organize all the projects under one solution. So I have this container, and in there I'm going to add 2 projects. The first project is going to be the web API. The second one is going to be the unit text. So let's have a look on how to do that. So right click on the solution. Now let's add a new project in here. And now this project is going to be the web API. And with this, maybe I can give it a name at all. Let's say this is API. Well, very simple name. This API. Aside from that, let's click on create because you want to maintain everything in the default mode. Click on create. Once you're done, we're going to add the next project, and that's the XUnit framework. We're going to add as a project to this. Let's see. Let's wait for this to get the project created, and now we create the XUnit as well. Yep, so this is ready. Now let's add the testing framework as a project. So right click on solution, then go to add, now new project. And the new project, what are you going to do? You can just click on this to limit it to testing. And in there we need the XUnit. So we need this XUnit test project. So make sure you click this for C#. So click this and then give it as test. So let's make it as just test. Okay. So we have this here. We add this. So in our solution we have 2 projects: our web API and our the unit testing. Yeah, so we have it in here. That is the default one, so we can go ahead and get rid of the default one, so we can see it in here. Good. So we have this. So let's first work on the API, and for the API we're going to install some packages. And as you know, if you want to connect to SQLite, there's some packages that you want to do, or you want to install them, and some stuff that you need to configure, isn't it? Great, so let's do that. Quickly, you go to dependencies and manage NuGet packages, and you need to install the EF core tools and the SQLite. So we need to also install. We have the EF core. Let's see, do you have the SQL? We have two, so let's install this tool. Then we have last package, and that is going to be the SQLite. If you want to install SQL Server, you can go ahead and undo it in here. So let's search for SQLite and install it. Okay, so we have it in here. Now what we're going to do here is we have the packages also installed in the packages section. So you can see we have these packages in here. Now the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to create a model, and maybe let's have a model, user model. Well, you can just change it to any model at all that you want. But for now, I'm going to just add a folder to this, and this is going to be models. Now in our model, I want to add just user model. We're going to have 3 properties in here. This is for testing purpose. So we are not much concerned with the validation and a whole lot. You're not much concerned with that. What you want to do here is you want to, at the end, you want to integrate this and now check it in our testing. Okay, so now that we have this, let's go to the same project. Let's add a new folder, and I'm going to name this as data. Aside from that, I'm going to add a new class, and that's going to be the appdb context or user context. Well, maybe I think user context will be okay. So this has to inherit from db context, and then this is coming from EF core. So we need to create constructor and then create a db set, which is going to be for our table, and that's what we are doing in here. Aside from that, what we're going to do here is we need to register this in the program.cs file, so we can perform database migration. So we can simply go to our program.cs file, and then before the app build, we want to add database context, and we have a db context class injected in here. We're using an SQLite, and this is our connection. So connection string, maybe we can decide not to use connection string in here, because this, let's make it straightforward. So in order to make it straightforward, just pass in data source, and now we are saying this is unit test db.db. Okay, so this is a database. Let's save that. So now that we are done with this, we can build this and perform migration. Let's rebuild the API section. That is ready. So now we can go ahead and now perform migration. So add migration. I'll give it a name. You can change this. You make sure you have a default project as API. After this is done, we're going to update the database. So update database. Yeah, so we have a database created, and now the database itself has been attached to our project. Now that we are done with this, we can go ahead and create a repo. So let me just add folder in here. Maybe I can say repository. Now with this repo, let me just add the interface and the implementation here straight away. So we go our way as well. So in here we have an interface, and I'm going to create it as iUser interface. So as I have this iUser interface, there are some methods or interfaces that I want to add because you want to perform CRUD. So that is a create, read, update, and delete. So we have our CRUD, create, update, delete, get by ID, that is read, and now get all. So in order for us to manage it or arrange it well, we have our CRUD, then update, and then delete. Yes, so we have our CRUD in here. Okay, what's the next thing to do? You can see here we are creating it, and now we're passing, there is a payload as a user because we want to create new user, and this is going to return bool. It could be true, could be false. And here get by ID, you want to return an entry of user. Then we specify the ID to make a search in the database. We also want to get all list of users, so that's the reason why we're using this IEnumerable or iCollection. Then we have update, we pass in the model as an object. Then at the end of the day, we want to return was able to get updated. If yes, return true. If no, then you know what you're going to return. Then the same thing applies to delete. We're able to delete it. If yes, that is true. If no, that is false. So now we have this interface created. What's the next thing to do? We need to create our implementation. So let's go to the same repo. And now in the same repo, I'm going to create a class. And I'm going to say this is user. So this is user repo. Is a repository. So I have this, and you know that anytime that you have this, you should inherit from this, right? So iUser interface, and now control period or control dot, you can go for implement interface, implement all the 5 or 6 interfaces that we created. Okay, now let's define the interfaces or the method here. All that you need to do is inject your user DB context. Then let's say this is context. Now for create, what are we doing in here? This is quite simple. So I have a simple method here to work it on for the create. We are creating new user, so this must be an async. As you know, we have an async, and we add it to the table. After that, we save it, and we check the response from the save changes, which returns integer. It is greater than 0. It means everything is set. Return true. If not, you know what to do. Return false. Aside from that, we have our update. Now for update, what are we doing? So let's see. This is our update. And now with the update, we want to get the user from the database. If we do find a user, then update the name and the email. Save it, and I return the same thing. Save changes also returns the ID. You want to return it to the user. You want to check in case it is greater than 0, which should be. Then you want to return true, else we return false. Okay, so the next one that we're doing here is, let's go for the delete in case I want to delete the user. All that you need to do here is to make a search the database, find the user. In case we have it, then we want to delete it. But in case you do not, what are you doing? You want to return not found. This specific user is not found, and that is exactly what we're doing. After that, after you remove it, you have to make sure you save it so you can make this change stick. Okay, good. Now what is the next thing? We have a get method to get all users, and this is quite simple. We can use this lambda expression to handle that, and this must be an async. So get to the database, the table known as the user, convert everything to a list, and now quickly return it. So we can make this to a single line. Yes. Now what is get by ID? This is also simple. Let's make this as a single line as well. So let's remove all this. And now you can see we have here get to the users, use first or default, and now search for the specific ID which is specified. Okay, so you can see that we have the CRUD implemented here nicely and beautifully. Good. Now that we are done with this, what is the next thing that we're supposed to do? We have to register this by creating dependency injection between the interface and the implementation. So we go to our program, And now down here, we can say that builder.services.add. You can use scoop, our user interface. Then we have our user repository as well. Great. So now that we have this, it tells us that it's ready. Now what we need to do to use this repo here, it is to create a controller. So for controller creation, I have a simple one here for you. Let me just grab it quickly. We go to our controllers folder, and now we're going to paste it in there. Now bear in mind that the namespace here is an API/controllers. So let's go to the controller, user controller that I just pasted, and I'm going to make this as API-controllers. Okay, so that is the namespace that I have added. Now what we are doing here is we need to inject the interface that we created from that repo. Then you can see here we need to also inject our model as a user model. Then simply we're going to call the create async. Now this is going to return true or false. We check if it is true, then return created at action. Call this method, and we specify the ID and then the user object. So, or we want to return bad request. And now from the read all, we're also doing the same thing. You can see we get the whole list. In case it is we have the count is greater than 0, we want to return okay. But in case the count is equal to 0, then you want to return not found. Get single, we do same. We get the ID, and now with this ID, maybe we can specify the ID here too. And now this ID is going to be integer as well. Okay. Now the ID that we have, we get from database. In case it is null, then return not found. But in case it isn't, then we have the user in there. For all of the updates, we call the same method, the same repo method. That is the update async. We pass in the object of update. Then we check it is going to return true or false. That's a boolean, and we check if it's true. Then we're going to return okay. But in case it isn't, then we want to return not found. Then the last one is the delete. We pass in the ID, and in here you will see that we call this delete endpoint. You pass in the ID in there, and in case it is true, it works. Then return no content. But in case it doesn't, then return not found. So that is what we are doing in our controller. So now that we have this, we're going to run this controller and make sure that this is working before we venture our unit testing. So let's run this and check it out. And there you go. So we have our API working. Now let's go in there and I'll try to add user. We have a default one, so we're going to add this. Let's see if it's going to work. Yes, we have 201 that is created, and we have our data given to us back. Now let's go and try to get everything from the database. Yes, we have only one. Now if I go for single, specify the ID as 1, click on execute, what do you think will happen? Yes, I believe you are thinking this, and there you go, we have it. Okay, so aside from that, let's go and update it. So I pass in the ID of 1. Now I want to change the name to updated, the email to @mail. Then let's go in for execute this. Well, we have it in here. How do we know it has been updated? We can go for the ID, and now we have it in there. You can see it's updated. And you can, let's add one more and delete that. This is a default one, and that's an ID of 2 automatically. So if I go for 2 in here, or even if I go for all, I have the 2 records, ID 2, let's get this deleted. So if I go to delete, pass in the ID of 2, execute this, we have 204. And aside as no content, and aside from that, if I go for get all, I have only one record. So you see that the controller here, it is working. But the problem is, it is not all the time that you need to run your application using the controller to verify and see each method, each function gives you what is expected. You can use the unit test to do that. So let's have a look on how do we test this controller using a unit testing. Now I have the project, or you and I have the project added already, isn't it? Great, so you have it in there. Now what we're going to do here is we need to install our two packages. That is our Fluent Assertion, and we need to install Fake It Easy. You can use mock package, or you can use Fake It Easy to mock service, okay, or to mock repo. Now I'm going to use the Fake It Easy. Let's see. So I can minimize this, go to the test dependencies, right click on it, go to manage NuGet packages, and now in here go to the browse tab, and I'll type in Fluent Assertion, and now let's install this package in here. Aside from that, we're going to install, you can use the mock MOQ, you can use this one, you can use this. Oh, I just type in knock, not mock. So that is MO. You can use this package. Let's wait. Okay, so you can use this mock package, or you can use Fake It Easy. So this is also another one, Fake It Easy. So keep it freaking faking. Yeah, so use this package. You can also install this. So this is what you're going to be using. I'm going to install this package as well. So I have two packages here, Fluent Assertion and now Fake It Easy. Now after we have these packages installed, let's go back to our unit testing project. And then here, let's create what we're going to test for controllers. So I'm going to add folder here for identification and organization purpose. So let me say this is controller. Maybe you can add controller test for naming conventions. I'll leave it up to you. Do what you think it is right for easy identification too. Okay, now when we check here, in order for us to create it, when we check to our controller, we have the controller name as user controller. What method are you going to test? Now, what is the end result? Now, in this controller or in this testing, we want to test, we want to return only success. Even when we are creating, we want to return created. If you are getting data, you want to return okay. You see, if you are returning if you are updating a record, you want to return an okay or success. So we are not returning the negative side. Okay, you want to return the positive side. That is what you're going to use in testing this. But if you want to return a negative side, that's quite simple. All that you do here is specify the action method that you want to return, and boom, you have it. You have a look in here, so don't worry. Now, so let's see, from our create, we use the controller name, the method name, and now we use the return, what you want to return. So here, you want to return created at action. So created. So you're going to be user controller underscore create, that is the method, underscore return created. That's going to be the method name that you're going to create for the test. And this test is particularly for this create action endpoint. Okay, so in our controller, let's see, in this our controllers folder, I'm going to add a class, and now this class is going to be user controller test. So user controller test. Okay, let's make this as public. Now, in order for you to run all the tests that you're going to create in here, you can go for test, then run all tests to make it run. Or you can also run individual tests, and I'll show you when we get there. So the next thing that we need to do here is to set up our dependencies. If I say dependencies, what does this controller need in order for it to work, or this test class needs in order for it to work? We are creating this test against this user controller. Now when you check this user controller, you see it has dependency in here. We are injecting the interface. So here we have to make a way that the interface also exists in the controller or the test before this can work. And that is the reason why we're introducing mocking. So what actually is mocking? To explain this simply, Mocking is a technique used in unit testing to simulate the behavior of complex objects or external systems that unit test or unit interact with. So by using mock objects, you can control the behavior of these dependencies, making it easier to test the unit in isolation. So example of this, you can see we are having the interface created, and now we are injecting the interface in here. Now this interface here gets connected to the repo, or that's the implementation, whereby we have a DB context injected in the implementation. So in order for us to test this, we don't want to actually hit a code straight to a database, but we rather want to create a fake instance of this interface so we can use it. So when creating this fake instance, we have to provide our own values for that. It is not going to database and it's not going to execute anything. We are creating a fake instance of this, and that is what you're going to be using to test. So for now, we are testing the controller. Now the motive of this is to check. Let's assume this method gives you the right record, the right result. Will this endpoint return what you want to return? That is the motive of it. So we are not much focused on this itself. That's the reason why you want to mock it. You want to create a fake one so we can use it and now bypass this one and now check if this endpoint is going to give us what is expected to retrieve or to give out. I hope this is clear. Good. So let's see. So we are not much focused on the actual work of the interface. We're going to create an instance of it, and now that's going to be the fake one, and we're going to specify our own values in it in all the methods that we have, the interfaces that we have. We're going to specify our own return type. In our interfaces, we specify some of the return types as Boolean, others to as the entity, others to as an enumerable of the entity. So anytime that we mock this, we must provide the same return type which corresponds with the type that we have or we have specified against each interface. Okay, so let's go back to the controller. Now let's inject our interface that we created. Now in order to do that, it is quite simple. Let's first create a private read-only variable. Now this is going to hold the interface in there. We can put everything in the constructor, or you can put everything in the scope. Let's say in the scope, in the function. Okay, but with this, since you're going to be using this often in all our CRUD testing, I want us to extract this in the constructor and now set the value to it as soon as this class gets called. Okay, so now we have this. Let's introduce the namespace, so control period, and now we need to add reference to this API project because that is where this interface is found. Now, whilst we have this set, the next thing we're going to do here is let's create constructor for this. So CTOR can get to constructor quickly, and in that we can specify by setting up our dependencies, and by doing that we can have a look at this. So this referring to this scope in here dot user interface, referring to this interface that we have created, is equal to, see here we are using this fake it easy, using this package. We want to fake the instance of this interface. This is not the original one. We are faking it. So anytime that you call this, you have the fake instance in there, not the original. We store it in here, and as soon as the app loads in, the constructor is going to load for the first time when the app is, or when the class is being called up. We're going to have it set up in here and be waiting patiently for the others to get ready. Set, and then go on. So now that we have this set, the next thing we need to do here is we need to declare our SUT, S-U-T, and that stands for system under test. System under test is actually the section that you're going to test, and also it refers to the specific component or unit that is being tested. So in unit testing, the SUT is isolated from its dependencies to ensure that tests are focused on the behavior of the system under test itself. So we need to also define it in here. And what is the unit that we are testing in here? I believe you know this, isn't it? Good. I heard you say controller. That's a user controller. Exactly, that is it. So we need to also create an instance of this user controller. So in order to do that, let's create a variable to hold that. make it globally available in this context. So let's have it set up here. That's a user controller, and now you have the instance created. Aside from that, anytime the app loads in the constructor, get ready first, we want to set our system under test section. We want to put it in there. All these are going to get executed within the constructor, and this is going to get started as soon as the app starts. So maybe you can make a reference to this explicitly, making a reference to what we have in here. This is very simple. You can also remove this because we have only one instance injected, and absolutely it's going to be assigned to that. But well, let's put it there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do here is I want us to create a fake user. You know, when you go to a interface, we're going to have a user in here. We're going to have, well, we're going to have a user, right? So this is going to return user. This is going to return, this is going to also take in user. This is also going to take in user. You see that? So we can create a fake user. Everything is going to be fake, fake, fake. Not the original one. Fake, fake, fake. For testing, fake, fake, fake. Okay. So in controller, let's create a fake item. That's a model. So you can see we have static, and this is static. You can just put this in a class. Well, and I'll add it here. Since it's only one here, I can directly put it in here. So create fake user, and we're going to fake this entity. You create an instance. Now you can see defaultly, if I click on this user, it has go to definition. It has no default values. When we get to a certain point, you need to provide values to this. But for now, let's maintain that. So you can see we have our constructor injected, we have our dependencies, and our system under test also clarified in there, and they are waiting for us to use them. All right, so let's go and start our first test. And now, since you're going for a CRUD, we want to start first with the create. How do we create? How do we test the create? This is quite simple. Now, for the create, let me actually give this comment here to explain. This is create, and I believe you know that, and that is the CRUD. Create. That's the first C. This method returns created, and that is a success. So as soon as we have created, it means the operation is successful, was executed. As soon as you have bad request, it means something is going on and it failed. We are not much concerned with this bad request because you want to actually be optimistic. You want to focus on the success side. So we are testing our endpoint to make sure that they return success. Good. So now that we have this set, the first thing to do here is to implement our attribute on top of the class, and this is going to be the fact. So fact, actually, that's going to be the starting point, okay? It's actually telling you that the debugger that, yes, as soon as you want to run this test, this is the starting point. Now you can see we have a user controller. That is what I told you earlier on. Do you remember? We have the create, and that is a method, and there's a return created, so that's a return type. So that's the naming convention for giving up your test names. Okay, now this is going to return nothing, so I decided to use it as void. And now here we have three patterns that we need to follow: arrange, act, and now assert. What is arrange? Arrange means what? Gathering all your use cases, gathering all the data that you'll be using or you will need to perform this. And now here I need only a fake user. So I create, this is the method, I create an instance of it, and now I store it in here. That's what I need. These are what you need. Now aside from that, we go to act. That is where you perform the actual action. So for the act, I used a.call to, then I am just calling a fake instance of this. Take note, this is not the original, this is a fake instance. Now I have a method known as create async. This create async needs a T model. Now this T model here, it is in the form of user. So the fake user that I have created, I have to inject it in here. Everything is fake, right? Then this method going to return true. Check it out. From the interface, create returns true. So I have to specify the return type. Let's assume this returns true. So specify the true in here, type in here, returns true. And now here, since you want to return created at action, if we check the controller, if it is true here, you want to return created at action. So we need to typecast the response or the result from this interface to this created at action. So this is the response. This is a method create, and now the result that's going to come in here, you want to typecast it to created as action, and now you pass in the user model. This user model is also going to pass on to this fake instance to get it created, and I return this value in as true. Aside from that, we go to the assert. Now the assert here is simply assessing the result. Assess the result, validate the result. Now what are we validating? You know, this is going to return a status code, so we want to check this status code should be of 201, and 201, it is in the form of created. You know, 200 is okay, and now 201 here, it is created. So it is created. You can also specify status code dot created. You can do that, but let's simply put the 201 in here, making it very simple and short. And now the result should not be null as well. This is a very simple way of following. This is a pattern of creating a test for every controller. Okay, so now that we have this, we need to run. How do you run this? Let's say let's first save this, and for us to run this, all that you need to do here is go to our test, and for now we can go for run all test. Now if I click on run all test, it's going to run this test, and I have test explorer in here. How do I get this? Let me put the test explorer down here. Okay, now when you go to test, you're going to find test explorer in there, and you can click on it to get it shown. Now we have this is running, and boom, we have it. You can see we have it, and now you can see, check here, there's the outcome one pass. So this is working. If I click on this, you have only one method in this, and that is a create. Let me just expand this for you to see what is going on. That's a return created, so that's a create. Now if you want to, we can put breakpoint in here. You see, now from the controller to user controller, that's a create. Let's put breakpoint here so we can check when this method gets called with the fake instance. Well, now let's go back to the test, and now in here I can click on this, then go to debug, and now let's have a look. This point is going to get hit. We're going to step into one after the other. Oh, I said it. You are in here. Now click on this, step into the next one. So create fake instance. Now this is just an instance with the default T model that we created. That is a model, the user. It has everything as null. By well, let's move on. Now if I go to step the next one, we have this method called, and we're going to return true. So this fake instance has been issued, has been called, and now it has returned true in here. Now how do we rectify that? If I click on next, that is where we're going to hit on an actual endpoint. Now check the results. You see we have the true in here. Now we check if it is true, then what are going to do this one. So click on next, and we see this is going to get executed. Now after it is done, we're going to click on this step in again. Then we have the results. If I click on results, check it out. We have the status code of 201 that is created, and we want to extract the status code of 201 from it. It matches with the status code which is brought here. Now click on execute, continue, then continue. And now in here, if we go to our, you see we have the test pass. Hooray! So that's a simple way of testing your controller endpoint. Okay, now you have a lot of things to do. So we're going to create a next method to handle the, we're talking about create, read, update, and delete. So let's quickly finish this. So let me just minimize this. Now let's go to the next one. So with this is going to be for read all. Now with the read all, this method also going to return okay for success, and now not found for fail. So in that, we need to also specify our fact on top as a starting point, making sure this is rectified or this is seen as test. Now aside from that, we see we have user controller.get users. So this is getting all lists of users, and in that you want to return okay if everything work. Arrange, we have to create an instance or a list of T model, that's the user, because at the end when we execute this interface, you want to return list of users. So by doing that, you need to provide this. We have to create this list manually so we can insert into the fake and now make it return. Yes, so that's what we're doing in here. Now we see we add just one record or one instance to the list, and then under the act we call the interface get async, and then from the return we pass in the list. Aside from that, we typecast the results to OK because that's what we want from our even name in here. Then we check if it is OK to 200. If it is OK to 200, wow. If it is equal to 200 status code, then you want to do that. That is for read all. Now let's finish off so we can run them together. Aside from that, we go to the next one, and that is a read single. So that's a get user by ID. This returns the same thing, OK, and also not found. Now in that, there's slight change in here that I made, and here by introducing the theory attribute and the inline data. What do these guys, what do they do? Yeah, well, you know, we here from get user need to specify an ID. So there are two ways of doing that. You can either manually or specify the ID under the arrange. So you can say int ID equal to 1 and I'll specify the ID in there. Or you can also specify the ID as a parameter. Now when you do that, you know, this end is going to be a test. It's going to allow you to specify the ID. So you have to make this ID available. Where do you make it available? Inside the inline data. So I want to pass in the ID of 1. And in order for me to do this, I need to specify the theory attribute on top. This is going to work the same as the fact attribute. So when you do this, do not also add the fact. Add only the theory, and well, you're good to go. We create fake instance of this user. We populate it in here since it's going to return this T model, and that's going to be the user. We call it and I'll pass in the return type, and I retype the results to OK. And then we check the status code in here. If it corresponds to what we have, 200, OK, then return it. That is for the get. Now let's see, aside from read single, what can we do again? We can go in for the update, isn't it? Let's see how do you update it. This is quite simple. Now for the update, this method returns OK and also not found. Now you have the user controller underscore update, and at the return type yes OK. We create a fake instance of this. Since we're going to update it, we need an user here, or a T-model instance of this T-model of user as payload. So in order to do that, we need to create a fake instance. So you can see that the method that you created, we are using it often. Great. So that's the best way to do it. The often method that you do use, make sure you create it once and create an instance of it and start using them. Now we also make a call to this fake interface. Then you pass in the model and specify the return type. After the results, you want to typecast it to the type that we want as OK. Then you want to check if it's okay, equal to 200. Give us the green light, and that's under the asset where we assess the content of the results. We have last one left, and that is delete. So for delete, what do you think will happen? Since you're going to specify an ID, you can use the theory or you can use the other method that I was talking about. Let me show you. So you have I've implemented all the two options in here. You can choose one for yourself, okay, and one for future use. So you can see we have in here, I use the same fact, and instead of I specify the parameter using the theory, no, or using the inline data, no, I not do that. I made explicitly here specified, and aside from that, we act it, we specify the user ID, then typecast the results here as no content. And then you want to consider the status code by asserting or accessing the results. Yeah, so this is all that we need to do. Now, once you have this set, what's the next thing to do? We're going to run all these tests and see. So click on this and I run all tests and check it out. Now we wait, so you can see that waiting for build to complete. Now it has to build the project first, then you're going to start running all the endpoints that we have as our test. Then let's see, so the first one is done. You have a green light. Well, let's wait and see. Great. Yeah, as you see, outcome is 5 passed, and we have green light for all of them. So it tells you that the endpoint, the control that we have created is working perfectly, and the results that we specified is what we are getting. Now I'm going to create another folder here, and it's going to be called Repositories. So this repository. Now in that, let's create a class of this in the test project. And now here I'm going to say repository test. So repository. So since I am creating for user repository, that is what we created in here. So you want to actually repeat the same name and I'll add test to it. Now once you have this class created, what is the first thing that we're going to do? We first have to make this as public. Now we have our two packages installed. That is a Fake It Easy for mocking, and also we have our Fluent Assertion. So when you go to the test package, you can see the project. You can see we have the two packages in here, Fake It Easy and Fluent Assertions. Okay, so let's go back to our unit. Now where we're going to have our test. So the first thing that we're going to do here is you want to build up this test. How do you do it? We first have to build our database connection. So let's create a class in here to build that. Now you can see this is going to get database context. In that, you created a user-db context class in there, so you want to pass it on here. So at the end of the day, this function is going to return db context. Then you can see we are going to build it. We specify the database that you're using as an SQLite, and in that we specify connection strings in here. After that, you want to get a db set or that's the db context out of this by creating this new instance, and we may have to make sure that it gets created. So it is going to get the database created. If it is not going to get it created, aside from that, we want to check in case the table that we have as users, it has nothing, it has no record. We want to seed it by adding one record. Then we save it. Then at the end we return db context. So this is what we are doing. Now we want to have the section, or anytime that the app, this class gets called, we want to get this ready. And after this gets ready, we want to assign it to a variable in here. So in that, we can create a read-only private of this user repository on top here. Okay, then we can utilize the constructor. So anytime this class gets called, this constructor is going to execute in the first place. Now when it gets executed, let's call this method. So since we are calling this method in the constructor, we cannot pass in a wait. So we have to use the result. Now the result is going to come as user db context. Then this repository needs this user db context. So when you go to the user repository, let's see user repository, you can see it has this user db context. So when creating an instance here, you must specify that, and that's the reason why we need to execute the statement. Now once you have this method executed, we have the response here in the form of db context. Then we can now fix it in here and then go away. Alright, so now that we have this set, in here, and we are good to go. So we can start using this variable as soon as there's an object, as soon as this class gets called. Okay, let's first see for create. Now for create, what it's going to do? Create method is going to return bool. If we check this, check the user repository. Now you see that is the create, and at the end of the day we are returning either true or false. You see, we are returning true or false in here because you're going to return boolean expression as a true or false. So in here, that's the same thing that we're going to do. Now we have to check. We create a fake user because before you create it, it needs a payload of user. So you have to specify it as an arrange section. Then when acting, we call the create async. We pass it on this fake user that we have created. Then we want to access the result. That is in the asset section. In that, we need to use Fluent Assertion. So we can have access to this should. And now we are saying that the results here should be true. So if everything works, this result should be true. Okay. Now once you have this, we can start trying this. How do you run this simple test? Click on test and I run all test. So we can run all test now. Then later on we can run only this test. Now to see this test is running, click on this text explorer. You can find that in the test. Then text explorer can be in here. Or let's say is it views? Okay, so that's the view. So you have Test Explorer. You can just click on that. And now this is running. So currently we have 6 paths. You can see our repository is still in a process. Now let's wait so we can have a green light as indicated here. Now 1 pass, 1 not run. So which one? And it's still running. So let's wait and see. Yeah, so this has run, and I can see we have 6 paths. If I click on this, there is a repository. Now the first method or the first unit here, it is a create return true. So if you want to debug it, you can put a breakpoint in here, then go to our repo. Okay, so once you have that, what we're going to do here is we have this case. So we are testing our DB contest. Now let's see. So let's run that. Click on this again, and then go to debug. Let's see if this breakpoint will get hit. Then in our repo in here, we can put, that is create, we can put breakpoint here. If this also gets hit, put a breakpoint here. Now let's go back again. You can see this hit. Click on step in. Let's step in and see. So you create a fake user. That's the default user that we know. Aside from that, we're going to call this method. You can see this point is hit. Then we're going to add. So this is a payload. You have a fake user. It has email and name as null. And let's see. So click on this. Now return. What's the response here? We have 1, meaning it's greater than 0, and it's going to return true. So step in again. Now you can see we have the results here as true, and now here this is going to get what? Passed. So this means that our controller or this repository to add record or to add user record is working perfectly. Good. Now let's see the next one. So we're going to talk about how to read. So to read, or that's a read get users, and I get users is going to return users, because it's going to return a list of users. And now for the arrange, that's why you need to gather all your assets, which you're going to be using to act. But we need to get only one asset, and that is the user repository. But we've done that in the constructor, so you need not to specify it here. So that's the reason why the arrange section is blank. It has the content being fixed up in the constructor. Now you see here, so here we can go ahead and call this straight ahead, because here we need not to specify any parameter in it. And now the results type here should be type of user. This is a list, so all of them should have a type of user. You can also be an explicit. You can check the count should be greater than 0. You can do that. All that you need to do here is use result.should.be, then count should be greater than 0, or you can actually go beyond this. But for now, we put a breakpoint here, click on this, debug this, and now let's see if this is going to return data to us. Bear in mind that we added one data when database executed. That is when the database does not have any record. You want to add one. So by getting this, there's record in the database. Click on step in. So that's a step over. Yes, I always say step in. So step over. Now let's see. So we have the results in here. Now this is going to return 3 counts. Okay. Then in that we have the results. All types should be what? Of this type of user. Then that is all. Step over, and it's also what? Passed. If you check this test explorer, you see it also passed. 7 passed now. Now let's add the next one. If I want to read single, that is a get by ID. I can use the theory attribute to specify this, or I can use the arrange section. So here I'm using the theory. So if I specify theory, I need not to specify the fact. Now, after you specify theory, you have to specify the inline data. What is the parameter that is passing in? Let's say passing 2, and that's going to be the ID. So it's this method is going to return, or it's going to come in with this parameter, and this parameter can be retrieved from this inline data as value 2. Then you pass it on here, and after that you can return it. So the returned value should be type of for this user. Let's also run this and check it out. You can put a breakpoint, then debug this. The point is also hit. Step over. We have it to be, yes, we have the record in here. The ID of 2 is found. And now this method is going to get passed. So you can see testing a repo is very simple. When you have your interface and implementation created well, you can test it straight away and you're going to have all passed without hitting any error in it. Yes. Now let's see. We have last but 2. We have the update. Now for update, we have to make a call to the get data. After get the data, we need to assign or update the properties before we can update it or save changes. We are using 3. The ID that we want to grab here, let's maintain the ID of 2. Now this ID of 2, it has to return true after the update has been performed. Now we specify this as an ID in here. And now first of all, we want to get the ID. So we want to get it from the repository. After that, you want to at least update one of the properties. Then after that, we call this repository and update it, pass down this user in here. Bear in mind that this user property of name has been updated. And now we want to see the result should be true. Okay, because here you want to return true at the end. So as soon as you get through, it tells you that this test is running and it's working and our repo is also active. Good. As usual, breakpoint must be put. Then let's go for debug and let's check it out. Oh yeah, so it is hit. As usual, click on let's go to the next tab. Now you can see here we have the user found. And now this user has the name updated now because you see it just updated it. And now we're going to call this endpoint in our repo to update it. You pass it on this user. And now this result must be greater than 0 after process is saved. Let's see. So step over again. Yes, and now that is true. So we have true, and now this method or this test is also passed. Yes, so this passed. Good. Now last one is the delete. So we can conclude the CRUD operation. And this is going to be the delete. For delete, we need to specify an ID. I'm not using the theory or the inline data. I want to specify it under the arrange by populating my requirement, what I need for this. So these are the components that I will be needing for the process. After I have this, I need to act. I call it delete async, passing on the ID. And now I have the result should be true because that's everything that I'm doing. The repository is only true. That's why I'm returning just a boolean value at the end. So that's the reason why I have only one result being checked up. Okay, as usual, breakpoint gets hit. Let's run this and check it out. So debug this. The point is now hit. Step over. So we have the ID of 3. Currently, do we have the ID of 3 in the database? Let's see. So yes, you have it. And now this has been deleted. So it should return true, and that's what we have. So this also passed. We are taking another lead forward by exploring how to test HTTP client services. This is a crucial aspect of ensuring your applications communicate reliably and securely with external APIs. Why is it important to test HTTP client service? I believe you are asking yourself. Testing HTTP client service is essential because it helps verify the correctness of your application's communication with external APIs. Imagine you are developing a weather application that relies on an external weather API to fetch and display current weather conditions for different cities. Your application has a service that uses HTTP client to make a request to this API and process the responses. Here is why testing this HTTP client is very important or crucial. You need to handle the success response. Your service needs to correctly pass the JSON response from the API and extract relevant information like temperature, humidity, and weather conditions. If the API structure changes slightly, your service should be robust enough to handle these changes gracefully without breaking. Sometimes the API might also be down, or there might be a network issue causing failed requests. Your service should be able to handle such scenarios by retrying and the request of providing a meaningful error handling to the user. There might be also another case where the API may return an error response with different status codes, like 400, which is bad request, 401, which is unauthorized, 404, which is not found, or 500, which is internal server error. Your service needs to handle each of these appropriately, ensuring that the application behaves correctly under different fail conditions. So you can see that testing HTTP client service is very important in here, and we are going to have a look on how to do that. So in the previous video, or the previous project that we started, we created our service, we created our repository, and we created our controller. We've tested the controller, we've tested the repository, and now we are going to test the service as well. So here, what I'm going to do here is I have a service created already. Maybe I'm not going to create another controller and start everything afresh again, because we are not much concerned or interested in service creation. Let's assume this service exists somewhere, and now all that you're going to do here is you're going to consume this. So in order to consume this, that is where we need to create the service which implement the HTTP client. So after implementing this service, that is what we're going to focus on, and also how to test this service and assume that you have the data from this external API, how it's going to behave in our service. That is what we are interested in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an external service that I've created as a project, or as an API project. So I'm going to right click on solution, then add existing project. So I have it here as external API, and I'm going to add this project to the solution. So let's assume this is an external API, and I'm going to make an API call to. Okay, now let's say I'm going to run this project, but before that, let me set this as a starter project first, and it is the same user API. So let's run this project. Oh, okay, so you can see our external API also working. It is the same CRUD for user, so we can add, we can get, we can perform all these CRUD operations for user as we did in the API that we created. So you can see we have a list of users in here, and let's assume this is an external API, and that is where we are going to consume this. So we want to consume this and display this in our API. We're going to make an HTTP call to this, and I'll get the content in here. Okay, so now that our external API is ready, what we need to do here is we need to go to our API, and now in our API we're going to create a service, and on that service we're going to make it call this external API. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is let me create a folder, and I name it as service, or create a folder as well. So a new folder, and I name it as service. Aside from that, we need to create an interface. But if I check the repo interface that I have in here, I can use this interface as well, because it is just create, delete, and all stuff, right? So maybe I can implement the same thing, because I need the same card in here, and I'm not having, or I don't want any special interface being added. I want to do the same. So what I'm going to do here is in the service, I'll just create my implementation straight ahead, and I'm going to say this user service. So user service. Now this user service, I'm going to inherit from this interface that we have in our controller. That's our the repo. So that's our user interface. And now with this control period, we need to implement the interface in here. Okay, now once you have this interfaces being implemented, what we're going to do here is we need to implement or use the HTTP client. Let's create an instance in here as an HTTP client. Or maybe we can provide the base address here. So maybe instead of us providing it in there, the program.cs file, we can also decide to provide it here. So let's maybe provide it here. So let me create constructor. Maybe in a production way, you can put this in your settings, and that's the apsettings.json, so you can get it from that config file. Okay, but for now, let's put this here. So I'm going to include HTTP client in here. Then there's going to be client. And now in that, let's create an assigned field. Great. Now I'm going to also say this dot, the same HTTP client, making a reference to this client, this variable here. Then we're saying this dot, you can have base address is equal to new URI. Then what are we doing? Let's go to our external API properties. So you see this is our external API. Then go to the properties in here, line settings, and now we want to grab the address. So this is an API address. Let's grab this. Let's go to user service. Let's paste it in here. The reason why we are doing this is we want to, before HTTP client get initialized, we want it to have its base address. So add the base address as soon as you create an instance of it. So the anytime that you want to use it to make a call, we have the base address. So what that you need to do here is we're going to add a controller and an endpoint. Very simple one. We don't want to be repeating this often. That's the reason why we are adding this in here. Okay. So now that we have an API, external API address in here. So basically, or in a rare case, if you are dealing with an external API, that is where you need to add the address. Okay. So now that we have this, we're going to create user. This user needs to return bool. It could be true, it could be false, right? But we have to first check the status code. We're not going to do much here because here, when you have it and you can implement retry policy, you can implement timeout policy, you can do a whole lot. Nowadays, we don't even call them policies. They are strategies based on the poly, the new feature introduced in poly. I've made a video on that. Maybe I'll put it in this video description as well. So you can have a look on how to implement all these to handle issues when making an API call. But for now, we want to return either true or false. Okay. So in order for us to get this create, we need to call this endpoint. And now this endpoint has a controller known as the user, and it has an endpoint known as create. So if you have a look from this external API service, let's go to the repository, the controller. Now this is the user controller. So the controller name here, it is user. So the first point that we're going to construct our API here, it is we have the user as a controller. Aside from that, we have add, get. So we have add, we have get, we have get by ID, right? We have update and now delete by ID. So get, update, then we have delete. Now let's cut this. Let's go to our service. Maybe I can paste this here. That's what you're going to guide us. Now create, we know that we've seen the base address already. So what we're going to do here is, let's make this as async first. Then we can have var results is equal to, we can have await HTTP client. Now this client has a base address already. So we can say post as JSON async. And all that you need to do here is to specify our base address. And that is a user. Remember, that is a controller. And aside from that, it is add. Aside from this, we need to provide a user model. So this is what we need. It's going to convert this model into JSON object, and I'll make it send to this endpoint. Append to the address here. Okay. Now maybe we can check. With this, since you're not implementing any retry or any other strategies, we can check it straight ahead. So we can say that if result.success status code, then what are you going to do? We want to return true. That's what I want to do. So return true. So as soon as we have true as a return, it tells you that yes, the operation was successful. Else, what are you going to do? We can return false. This is a very simple one. You see? So you want to return true in case the status code is success. In case it is not, you want to return false. Here we are not extracting, we are not finding out the reason why it couldn't add. It doesn't matter us. What it matters most here is to make sure it exists. The process is successfully performed. Okay. Now for delete, you also want to do the same thing. So let's make this as an async. Then when we come to the next line, we are going to also specify the delete option. And since it's going to return also Boolean expression, we can also use the same method in here. So we're going to call for delete async, that's a user, and now delete. We specify the ID in here as a parameter, because here with the delete, it needs an ID. So we have to specify the ID in here. And using this, make it a string interpolation, so we can specify variables inside string. That's great. That's amazing. Okay. Now what of get all? We can use just a line of code to handle that. Now with this, here must be as an async. Then we're going to say that await. Then we have our HTTP client service dot then get from JSON async. So let's add enumerable of user. Then let's specify the route, and it is for user controller / get. That is all that we are doing. Now get by ID, it's the same thing. We specify the ID in here, so we can grab this from here. Then with this, because it's going to return user object. This is going to return list of user object. So let's make this as an async. Then here, let's specify the string interpolation, and we can now specify get. Let's see the endpoint. Is it only get or get by ID? We have get. So from the user controller, we have get and I get. Okay, so we can specify this get. Then we have our ID. You see? So that's what we are doing in here. This is going to return user. And now we have to remove this because it is not enumerable. It's just a single object in that. Now when it gets to the update, what are we doing? That's just going to update the user. So we can also have the same method. But in that, the extension method that we're going to use here is an update or put as JSON async. So user update pass on the user model. So here is going to be an async as well. Okay. So this is what we're going to do to create our service in here. We have the same implementation of the interface. Then we're going to create an individual HTTP client service for each function. Okay. So now that we have this, let's go to our program and then register this. So under the external, not the external, because external, we are not doing anything in here. In the API, go to your program. And now since we are using HTTP client, we need to register the service. So let's add builder.services. Add HTTP client. So add this. Now we can make it limited to this. You know, we are adding this service specifically for this user service. It might be that you may have different services with different clients. Maybe this time around we want to use HTTP client here. But another one we want to also use maybe Refit client, or we want to use REST Sharp. So in order to make it general, we can specify this to this service. Okay, so we say our user interface. Then what is the implementation? It is user service, because it's using the same interface. So making this limited to only this interface and not this implementation. Okay, so as we are done with this, all we're going to do here is we can test this. How do we test it? That is when we need to create our test class and start testing all the CRUD methods that we have in the service. So let's go to the external or the test. Now in the test, we can even run this straight ahead in our controller and check it out first before we create this. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. Now you see, when you go to this controller, we have the same user controller that we created. So instead of us implementing the interface in here, I'm going to make a duplicate of this. So let's copy and paste this. And now we're going to change this to user external service controller. So this is user external service controller. Let's go to our interface, our solution. Then from our service, I want to create our user service. Let me create this interface. So our user service. Now let me go to the interface in here. Let me grab what we have. Let's go to the interface service, and now let's paste it in here. The same thing that we are doing. Let's include this namespace. Now when we are done, we go back to our user service, and now we're going to use not this, but rather our user service. Okay, we're going to use this. After we are done, we go to a program.cs file. So instead of using this, we need to use our user service. Very simple. The implementation is still the same. Now that we have this, we go to our controller, and now we can clear this and use our user interface. Oh, this is service. Our user service, and we call it user service. So we can just go ahead and now change user service. That is create async user service.get everything, user service.get by ID, user service by update, the user service.delete. So you see here we are getting it from the service, external service. Now let's see. So we are not running this. Let's run only the API first and then check it out. Okay, so this is working. Now let's try to get. We are using this external user service, so maybe we can hide this. Now this, let's try to get all users from that external service. We are not running that service, so we should have no connection could be established. Yeah, we have it. So you can see there's an error because that service machine refused it because it is not it's not active. You see, so you can see no connection could be made because the target machine refused it. Yes. So now let's run the external service. So let's assume this external service is active now. Now let's go and make, so this is an external service that is active. Let's go and click on this button again. Now let's see what is going to return us a list of users. Whoa, we have it. So you can see we have a list of users from this external service. We can then update this, we can then delete this, we can get single, we can specify maybe 4, execute this, we have it. Now we can update this. So under update, we specify the ID here as 4, string updated now. Then we can, let's grab this also, and now paste it on here, updated now. Okay, now let's click on execute, and let's see. So we have it. Now if I go for this get by ID, so let me specify the same ID again, you can see it has been updated. So we can now interact with our service. Then we can also delete the same request from there. So maybe I can just, okay, so let's see, delete, specify the ID of 4, click on execute, it has been deleted. Now what if I go for execute this, get this, let's wait and see. The response status code does not indicate success 404, meaning that specific item is not found. And that is exactly what we are doing. You know, if I try to get by ID, get single, and if I go there and user is not return 404, not found. And that is the reason why we are getting this. So you can see that our service CRUD is working as expected. Good. Now we want to test only this service. We don't want to test the controller because we've done this already. We want to test this user service that we have created, this interface and this implementation. So let's go to our, let's stop this. Let's then go to the test, and now we have a controller which contains the controller test. Repository contains the repository test. And now what else do you think we're going to do? Let's create our service. So this is our service, and this is going to contain the service test. And what's the name of the service that we're going to create for? It is user service test. So that's user service test. So you know, in order for us to create fake HTTP client, so we can detect the behavior of the method in it, that is the get async, post.json async, delete async, and etc. This seems like it will be straightforward task, but this is very complicated by the design of this HTTP client. So it is not faking friendly. It means you can't mock this. So what can you do? There's a way that we can do this and get the same response. Okay, when we check the documentation of this Fake It Easy, and maybe I'll put a link in there. They provided a way of doing that by creating own or fakeable HTTP client or HTTP message handler, which inherit from this HTTP message handler. Then we have our own implementation of this. So maybe we have to create this. Then after we create this class, we're going to use this class in making a call by specifying the content that we need. This content must be in the form of a string. So if you have a list of data that you want to return or even an object, we need to serialize this object to become a string. Then we can form in the content. After doing that, we go in there and use this fakeable HTTP message handler that we created to make a request. And in that, you can see we're going to have our client in here. So let's try to, now we have an idea of this. Let's try to modify this a little bit to suit what we want. So I'm going to copy this. Let's copy the name in here. Then we go back to application. Now maybe we can create a folder and name it as helpers. And let's create a class. Now this is fakeable HTTP message handler. Now in that, let's grab the implementation that they gave to us. Let's paste it here. It's an abstract class, and then here we are calling this fake send async. In HTTP client, there's a method known as send async. Here I want to create a fake one, so we can make a send to its own, and now we pass in our request. Okay, now that we have this, we can, let me remove all this here. When you check the docs again, you can see we are using this fake class that we created in here to make a call. Okay, but if we decide to use this, unless we put this any other time in our code, meanwhile we have a service also created, and this service we don't want to be calling this straight ahead because we have this implemented in a service that is a get async and a whole lot. So we want to modify this a little bit to suit what we want. Now at the end of the day, we want to return a client, so that anytime that we call this client, we pass in this handler. Then we have our fakeable message handler. Then we can use it as a client and I make a call. Good. So this is what I did for that. Let's create another class in the same folder, helper. And this class, we're going to use this fakeable HTTP message handler that we created. So let's add a class in here, and this is going to be fake HTTP client. So now this, we can make this as static. So maybe I'd like to make it as custom. For this custom, yes. Let me just modify the name in here. So that is custom fake HTTP client. Good. Now this should be a public static. So let's make this public so we can be using it all over. And it's a static, so we don't need to create an instance. We can go ahead and use it straightforward. Okay. Now that we have this, we can create a var response. The response is equal to new HTTP response message. So HTTP response message. And now with this, we can implement this. So there's a var response. But before that, this must be in a class. Forgot that. This must be in a public static. And we must return at the end HTTP client. And I will say this is fake HTTP client. This you need to pass in a T model. It could be a list of model. It could be single model. And now with this, we can say this is T and now the content is here. Okay. You can also specify this as string so that you can convert the content into string before bringing it here. What I'm doing here is we want to bring the content straight from here, and then we do the conversion here. So that's the reason why I'm using this generic key here as t value. Okay, now in that, all that I need to do here is I'm going to move this in here. Good. Okay, so now that we have our response, what we're going to do here is it has a property known as content. Now this content is equal to new string content. So new string content. And now with this new string content, let's see, all that you need to do here is use this JSON as said earlier on, JSON serializer. So we need to use JSON serializer, which is coming from system.test.json.serialize, then specify the content. That is all that we are doing. So let's say now we have this. We have our content, we have our response in here. That's what we're going to pass it on into this fig as a return. Now, the next thing we're going to do here is we need to create a handler. Now, this handler, we're going to use the class that you created as a fakeable HTTP message handler. So handler is equal to a dot, then let's fake it. So a dot fake. Now we need to use the fake it easy. Then after we fake this, let's specify the fakeable HTTP message handler. So we create an instance of this like this. So this is going to be our handler. Now once you have this handler, we have to make a call. So under the structure for making testing, this call should actually come under the act. So anytime that we're using this, we're going to call this under the act session. Okay, so let's say we have our a.call2. Now this call2 is a function, so let's make it this. Pointer is equal to the handler that we have in here now. Dot, this handler has a method known as fake send async. And now in that, what are we doing? We can specify the a dot. So our HTTP request, which is going to come in HTTP request message, then dot ignore. So we want to modify what they give it to us. Then also we have a cancellation token. So let's also specify the cancellation token as well. So that is a cancellation token. We want to also ignore this. So we don't want any requests, because this request, we're going to have our own request already. So we don't want any requests again from the HTTP client. And we don't want any token as well. So we need to ignore all this. Good. So we have ignored what you want. Then at the end of the day, we need to have a return. So what I return? Very simple. Let's return the response. Response here is in the form of JSON. It could be a list of objects. It could be just a type. Well, you need to return that. Okay. Then at the end of the day, let's return new HTTP client. And now inside that, since we've created our own fakeable or fake client, we pass in the handler. Then we have our client created. Okay, so now that we have this, we can go ahead and use this custom fakeable or fake HTTP client in our test. So now when you come here, this is our test. This is going to be a public. And the first test that we're going to do here is going to be our the create. This create should return true, right? So let's see how to create that. Now the first thing that you're going to do here is you're going to have, let's say this is create. Now this create should return. So let's make this as a fact starting point from this test. And in that we need to have our public. This is an async, could be a tags or void. Well, it's not returning anything. So this is user test or user service. So the method name that we are applying is a user service. Now what is the method itself? That is a create user. And what is going to return? So return true. Okay, now under the arrange section, what are the things that we need, a component that we're going to be using here? we need to create our fake user. So a.fake, then let's specify this user model. So this is our fake user. Now let's get our client, and our client, you can get our client from custom HTTP client dot fake HTTP client. Now this shouldn't be here because here we're going to make a call, and this should come from this act. So we have to get our client, and this client here is equal to our custom that you created, custom HTTP fake client. Then we can have fake HTTP client. In that, we need to specify the type. We can make it an explicit, or we can leave it like that. Here we want to return, this is a return type of true. Okay, or to make it to display that as well, we can make this as bool, because this return the T item. Okay, so now that we have this, this is going to make a call, and I return this true that we have provided. Then let's create an instance of this user service. So that's going to be our system under test. That's a user service. So we say user service is equal to new user service. And you know, this user service needs a parameter known as client, so specifying the client that we have created. Now let's go to, we need to now add this. So we say this is a result is equal to this. Let's make this an await, and that is a user service dot, that is this service that we created dot, and now you want to have create async, and now specify in the fake user that we have created. Now under asset, that is we're going to access the result. You're going to say that, you know, anytime that we create clients, since you're going to use for test, and you want this to persist in the scope of this, anytime that we are done a length, we can dispose this client. So we can say client.dispose this, so that anytime that I want to start a new test, we can create its own client for that. Okay, then the next one that I'm going to do here is, let's say results dot should be. Now this should be is coming from the assertion package that we installed as a Fluent, then dot be true, because at the end you want to return true. This is what that you want to return. So you want to check that if everything worked, then at the end we should have that's a true, because that's what you are passing into the HTTP client in here as true. So we need to retrieve this in here. Okay, so now that we have this, we need to run this test and check it out. So let's save this, then let's go to test, and now maybe let's first run our test first and see. So this test is going to get run, then let's see how this is going to look like. But before we do that, or while it is processing it, let's go to our user service that we created, and now under the create, let's put a breakpoint in here. Okay, then let's go back to our, let me clear this, our user service test. Okay, so this is still running. Let's go to Test Explorer. You can see that from the view, then you can have Test Explorer in here, so you can click on it to see. Now 10 passed on, and this is still running. So you can see test 1 is still running, it's not yet. So let's wait and see. Yeah, so we are much interested in this test, and you can see this has passed. So this test user test, that's the first one as a create user, return true, it has passed. Now to debug it, put a breakpoint in here, click on this, pass, then click on debug. Let's see whether it's going to get hit to the original interface or the original implementation that we have created. Now let's see what's going to return. So we are hit, click on step over. Now you create a fake instance, this is a fake user, which contains null for each. You can specify properties, and you can specify the values to these properties, but well, let's maintain this. Then let's click on step in. We have our client here created. Now you can see we have our client created. Step over again. So we have our service also created nicely, which also implement the HTTP client and pass it on our base address. Okay, Now the next one is we're going to make this call. Now we are hit. Click on next. So push it, and this will return success. Yes, we have it. So this return is status code of 200, meaning it's success. And now we are checking if it's success, then we're going to return true. And now let's see what's going to happen. Good. So return true. And now we step in, we go back again. Then we dispose the client. Since we are done, we dispose it, and now we can access the result, and it should be true. Second result says is true. So this function or this test is passed. Good. So that is simple steps to follow and to test your service. Now that we have this, is the same thing that we're going to do for all the CRUD. So I can just go ahead and copy everything, and I'll paste them so we go on our way. Alright, so the next one is let's read all. We're going to get read all. What you are doing for the asset or the act, it is the same. So watch out. You can see we're using our custom HTTP client in here. So that's our fake HTTP client that we get. And now you can see we are creating the same method, but this time around, since we need a list of users, we need to specify it in here. You can decide not to specify, but well, I brought them here for you to see what you're doing. And also you can see, since we also want to return a list, we need to actually at least add one. We're adding one user to the list that we have in here. Then act. What are we acting? We want to get all async, then we dispose it, and at the end we want to check all the type that we're going to get should be of type of user, and it shouldn't be empty because you have record in here. It should be at least one or more. Okay, so this is what you need to do. I think this should be under act. Great. Now we can also put a breakpoint in here to the user service, and that is a user service. This get all, this is going to get hit. And also let's go back to user test. We have our point in here. Now let's go to debug. So this also hits. Now step over. We have a user. Now this user is going to have 1. So currently the count is 0. If I click on next, you can see now you have the count as 1. So at least we have one item in there. Then we're going to create this, call this, and like you see, it's going to call this method in here. Then the result should be 1. Yes. So if so, then we can now access it. All these records in this results, the type here is user, and it is true. And result is not also empty because we have 1 at the end. And then this test also passed. Yes, so it is also passed. Now let's see the next one. So that's going to be read single, and read single is also going to do the same for us. So read single, and now this read single here, we need to specify a theory. When you specify the theory, it allows you to specify an inline data. Now since this method needs a parameter of ID, we can specify the ID value in here, so we can use it in the testing. Okay, then the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to create our fake. And now this is going to return a user. So at least we need to specify a record in it so we can make a search out of this and now retrieve the same record, pass it on to our client, and off you go. So that's what we are doing. Now this, we need to specify our client. So we have our client in there. Then there is the endpoint that we need here. It is get user by ID. So that is this one. We specify the ID, and that is all. This is also going to give us the same thing as well. Okay. Now we can also put a breakpoint. Let's go to the user service, get by ID, then put a breakpoint. Now let's run and check it out. So the parameter that we specify here is going to be used in here. So here we're going to have the ID of 1. Now step over, we create a fake user which has the same ID specified in here. Now aside from this, we create a fake client, as you know, we're going to return user. Then in that, we're going to call the service get by ID async. We dispose it, and at the end, we are checking what is the results in here. We have the results as a user, and that's what we have. So this also working. So if the service provides us with this, then we are good to go. Well, our service is active with no error. Okay, so let's see now. That is a read single. We have the last two, the update, and we have also delete. So it is the same thing that we are doing. Now for update, we do the same thing, user service dot update user return true. So anytime that you update, it's going to return true or false. That is what we customize our service to return. You can also change it to suit what you want. Okay, as usual, this should be under the act. Then we need to specify an update. So this is update async. Specify the user that we have created here. Here we also assign up a new user in here. That's for the update. The result should be true after we are done. Okay, so you can see all the time we are creating this user here. So we can actually create a fixture folder, then be adding all this in this, so we can call that static class and use them in here. But since we have only this simple line of code, that's the reason why I did not group them in that folder. But you can also do that. So you can be using that often instead of creating an instance and using it all over again. You can just create instance once and be calling that instance and be using it off and on. Okay, so that's an update, and this is going to also work. Then we can put a breakpoint as well. Then we can run this and check it out. So debug this. While this is building, we go to our update, put a breakpoint in here. Now let's see. So this also hits. Now let's step over. We create a fake user. We populate it nicely. Then we create a fake client. We inject this client in the service. Then we create the instance of the service and then start working with it. We have a user here. That's what we have provided already. You can see we have the same thing. Now we're going to make a call to this. And now this is going to return true. So you can see we have a status code of 200. And in case it is, then know what to do, return true. And that is what it's doing. Then we can now dispose it and we can check it. This also passed. So step out. Then we have it also passed. Now let's talk about the last method in the CRUD, and that is what? Delete. Delete. So delete is also the same thing. Now all that you do here is you need to provide an ID for that. Now let's make our custom client. Then we're going to use is delete at async. We pass on the ID. This will return true, and it should be true. Put breakpoint. Now let's run this. Let's go to the user service, and now under the delete, you can see that all of these, they have pass, right? Pass. So it tells you that they are all passed except only the delete, and when we are done, this also get passed. Let's see from the user test. We step over. We have an ID already created. We create a fake account, fake HTTP client, inject this client in the service, then call the method. Now let's see. So we're going to make a call. What the response here is 200. We have it and return true if that's so. Yes. And now we dispose it and result should be true. Great. So you can see we are passed. Now if you go to Test Explorer, you can see we have all of these and they are all in a green light. They are all passed, isn't it? Good. So that's a simple way to handle your user service. Any service which implement a client for making an external call, you can do that. Whether you're using a REST app, whether you're using any other HTTP client, you can actually mock it in the same way and use it in your application. So when you check your user service that we created, you see that all of this, we've tested them and they are all passed. As you can see, they are all passed. You have green light icons indicated on top of each. Yep, so I believe by now you have a solid understanding on how to test your client, that's an HTTP client service, throughout. So in this lesson, we've explored the critical importance of testing HTTP client service within your application. We've also seen how comprehensive testing can ensure reliability, security, performance, and maintainability, particularly when dealing with an external APIs. Through our weather application scenario 2, we've highlighted the various challenges that can arise, such as handling success and error responses, managing other cases, and ensuring performance under load. So by implementing this test for your HTTP client services, you can build more robust and user-friendly applications. So these tests not only help in catching issues early, but also provide a safety net when making updates or changes to your code, giving you confidence in your application stability. Remember, the goal is to create applications that can gracefully handle the complexities and uncertainties of interacting with external APIs, ultimately leading to a better user experience and a more reliable product. Thank you for joining us in this journey to elevate your testing skills. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated for our latest tutorial. Until next time, happy coding and take care.